Imagine exploring Italy with an art historian, or cruising Alaska's Inside Passage with a renowned geologist. When you travel with Smithsonian Journeys, you gain a deeper understanding of the world's fascinating places. Find a wide range of river cruises, classic land journeys, hiking trips, and more at smithsonianjourneys.org or by calling 855-330-1542. Your participation benefits the important work of the Smithsonian. Visit smithsonianjourneys.org/podcast to request your free catalog.
Smithsonian is a dazzling magazine that entertains and surprises. Articles about everything from bubblegum to Goya to why dogs bark.
This 1992 ad has it right. We cover a lot here at Smithsonian Magazine.
About faraway galaxies, ants from hell, and Andy Warhol. The writing is colorful, the graphics contemporary, the attitude is now.
30 years later, our attitude is still now. Anyway, the people who make the magazine know a lot. We read a lot. So here at the end of the year, we thought you might want to know what we're all reading and enjoying. We asked a bunch of colleagues for their favorite nonfiction books of 2023. So whether you're looking for a stocking stuffer or for something to cozy up next to the Yule log with, we've got something for you. Besides a subscription to the magazine, of course.
It's so interesting that you'll be more interesting. But don't take our word for it. Find out for yourself. Order Smithsonian Magazine now. Call toll-free 800.
From Smithsonian Magazine and PRX Productions, this is There's More to That, the show where everyone can find a story to get excited about. In this episode, our favorite books from 2023. I'm Chris Clement. The holidays are coming, and SmithsonianStore.com has gifts for everyone on your list. Find museum-inspired jewelry, home goods, clothing, books, toys, and more. Save 10% and get free shipping when you go to SmithsonianStore.com and enter the promo code PODCAST at checkout. All profits support the Smithsonian's mission. Remember to use code PODCAST when you shop SmithsonianStore.com today. Don't wait. Offer valid only for a limited time. Recently published from Smithsonian Books, The Object at Hand, Intriguing and Inspiring Stories from the Smithsonian Collections by Beth Pye Lieberman presents a behind-the-scenes vantage point into the Smithsonian collections. From Dorothy's ruby slippers to a speech that saved Teddy Roosevelt from assassination, this authoritative guide delivers a visit to the Smithsonian like no other. The Object at Hand is available wherever books are sold.
I don't think I would necessarily call myself a sports fan. I am a history fan.
Tracy Scott Forson is a senior editor at Smithsonian Magazine.
I'm an American history fan specifically. I just like hearing people's stories of overcoming adversity and rising to challenges, the underdog succeeding. I guess we all like an underdog story to some extent.
Tracy's favorite nonfiction book this year was Althea, The Life of Tennis Champion Althea Gibson by Sally Jacobs. For any listeners who don't know, who was Althea Gibson?
Oh, well, she was a tennis player who ended up being one of the first African-American women to win championships like Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. She was kind of integral as far as integrating the sport of tennis.
Why'd you like this book?
The scenes, the way that Sally Jacobs writes them, I felt like I could visualize the tennis matches in my head. Yeah, it was almost like watching a movie in a way. So it talked about the weather, the number of spectators at the court, you know, how each competitor played, the differences in how they played. I mean, it was just, I thought it was very well written with a lot of detail that could help you visualize it. One of the chapters that stuck out to me was about a loss that Althea had. The first tennis player that she played against while she was integrating a restricted court. And I thought that was really interesting that she lost, but that it was still a win in a way. Sometimes when you lose, there's still a lot of success in it. Sometimes when you think about pioneers and people who helped break down Jim Crow barriers, you kind of think that they were all very militant and that was even their goal sometimes, but it seems like for Althea Gibson, she just really wanted to play tennis. And the fact that she was integrating a tennis court was not really her goal, but her goal was to play. But to be the best, she had to go up against the best. And that's how she ended up where she ended up. It kind of helped me relate to her like she was just a kind of a regular person, because she was so good at what she was doing. That's why she was thrust into the forefront. So I didn't know that.
Is there anyone in your life who you think would enjoy this book? Who are you picturing when you think of someone who might like this?
I guess the first person that comes to mind, I guess, is my mother. I think because was alive during that time, and I don't think she knows a lot about the story, but I think she could kind of relate just to the climate. And probably if I were to suggest it to a younger person, I have a cousin and goddaughter, so I would probably recommend it to her, because I think it's something that kind of teaches you to persevere and to keep trying, and even see successes when you may not reach the goal that you set for yourself. You can still kind of use it in a positive way to move forward.
Is science editor your title?
Yeah, I think it's longer than that, but that's basically what I am. I think it's like associate web editor of science for digital or something like that. I can double.
Maybe we should just say you're an editor?
Yeah, a science editor.
Joe Spring is a science editor.
Vice president to the associate of,
Yes, it's going to get a few more punctuation marks.
For this list, I'm recommending Crossings, How Road Ecology is Shaping the Future of Our Planet by Ben Goldfarb.
Why did you like this book?
I love this book because it's an excellent combination of deep reporting and in the field reporting with scientists. Right off in the start of the book, Goldfarb goes into detail with all these jaw-dropping stats about how roads impact wildlife and kind of sets the scene. But then pretty quickly he goes out into the field with scientists, and that's where the strength of the book lies. So he goes out with scientists studying how roads impact snakes in Central America, or how roads impact insects in North America. And he's got kind of a wry sensibility, and he takes complex science and makes it really easy to digest. And the book is not just informative, but entertaining as a result.
So what is road ecology? Is it the effect that roads have on wildlife?
Yep. Roads are a key impactor for wildlife around the world, and the way that they impact wildlife also impacts people as well. One of the stats in the book that really grabbed me was that it's estimated that 1 million deer a year are involved in crashes on U.S. roads, and that leads to, I think, 20,000 injuries of people and 200 deaths a year. And that's the most fatalities for any wild animal. That stat is obviously a depressing stat, but there's a lot in the book that's hopeful too. One of the things that Goldfarb does in the book is go into some of the innovations that have recently been built or are in the works to prevent conflicts between road and wildlife. So underpasses in some locations, wildlife overpasses in some locations.
Yeah, I feel like we just skipped right over the fact that he apparently did answer why the chicken crossed the road, which is because there was a hen on the other side of the road.
Yeah, he's just really wry throughout the book, and that makes the book engaging and really easy to read.
How did this book come to your attention?
This book came to my attention because I really like Ben Goldfarb. I think he's one of the best science and nature writers out there. And I have read his previous book, which was called Eager, which was all about beavers in North America. And it was a similar style of book. It's a combination of deep reporting and in the field reports with scientists. And this book is more the same, and it's even better than that one, I think. I think this book is for anyone. If you're a general reader that has any interest in science, you would love this book. If you're a fan of writers like David Quammen or Elizabeth Kolbert, this book is right up your alley.
Oh, I'm excited to share this with you.
Beth Pye Lieberman is an OG of Smithsonian Magazine, who oversees our coverage of the Smithsonian museums. She herself published a book this year. It's called The Object at Hand. It's a compilation of Smithsonian Magazine's coverage of objects from inside the Smithsonian Museum collections, including the Hope Diamond and a glass plate portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Beth is also retiring this year.
It's 37 years, December 1st, and I decided it was a random year to hang up my pencil, put it down.
Because it's a special occasion, we were willing to forget that we asked her to recommend a work of nonfiction. But it's also because she was so eager to talk about The Wind Knows My Name by Isabel Allende.
I love Isabel Allende, and so when a new book of hers comes out, I'm the first to buy it. This book, though, speaks to a lot of issues that we are experiencing today. And this is a story about children and the trauma that is brought to them during times of war. This little girl, who's the center of the story, is Anita Diaz, and we meet her in Nogales at the border in 2019, at a time when the former administration was separating children from their parents. Little Anita is there. She's blind, and her mother is taken away from her in chains, and she lives with that moment when her mother is taken from her. And the other character in this story is Samuel Adler, and he's a young boy in Vienna on the night of November 9th, 1938, known as Kristallnacht. And on that night, tremendous violence separates his family, and his mother figures out a way to get him on a train and out of harm's way, and he never sees his family again. And so, by twists and turns, Samuel Adler, many years later, comes to know Anita Diaz, who never sees her mother again.
Wow. So this sounds like an epic tale. Has historical fiction occasionally intersected with your professional duties?
Oh boy, that's a really terrific question. I think any time that we engage with novels like this, we're engaging with empathy. And I think that any time that we engage with trauma and difficult stories of our past, we again are experiencing empathy.
My whole job is reading every issue cover to cover, several times over. We publish more than 500 feature stories on the site every year, and I read all of those.
Nina Goldman is an enforcer of rules here at Smithsonian because she is our copy editor. We asked her to recommend a nonfiction book that came out in 2023. Instead, she gave us a novel published in 1918.
At the end of the long day, the last thing I want to do is read more contemporary nonfiction.
Earlier this year, Nina edited a Smithsonian feature story about author Willa Cather. Smithsonian contributor Jeff McGregor visited Cather's hometown of Red Cloud, Nebraska.
I'd never read anything by Willa Cather, but he did this amazing job describing the rusty prairies and the cobbled streets that inspired Cather's work. And so I thought, I'll pick up an old paperback copy of my Antonia. And I really recommend that book. Cather's hometown is celebrating her 150th birthday, and that's why Jeff wrote the piece. But all those years later, 2023, I found the book still so engaging and lively. And it shows the uphill battle that immigrant families face, and that's, a story that's still relevant today. Plus, reading about the difficult conditions that Jim and Antonia and all their friends endured out on the frontier made me really grateful for all the modern conveniences that I have today. So yeah.
What is My Antonia about?
My Antonia is about, it's got an interesting framing device because it's kind of this Willa Cather author insert figure at the beginning says, I have this friend Jim and he has this really interesting story. And then you get the story that Jim tells, but the story Jim tells is really about Antonia and these other women living out on the frontier. So it's a woman telling a man telling a woman's story. And yeah, it's about these kind of pioneer families out in Nebraska. And then we follow Jim as he grows up and ends up in the city and everything. But the part that's really engaging and that stuck with me the most was these childhood stories of killing a rattlesnake in a field with a shovel and just trying to make it through the winter, which, we're all doing here now, trying to deal with daylight savings time, but it's not quite the same as just trying not to freeze and have enough food.
Killing snakes with shovels.
Yeah, killing snakes with shovels. I'm glad I don't have to do that now.
Who would you recommend My Antonia to?
Everyone can find something within it. Jeff says in the piece, this is the kind of book that people might have read when they were in high school and they were too young to really appreciate it. And I might suggest if you tried to read Willa Cather when you were younger and didn't feel like, oh, this old book, whatever, maybe try returning to it, because I really enjoyed it. And they're classics for a reason. So, yeah.
I am recommending a book that we actually excerpted in the magazine last June. It's called My Friend Anne Frank, the inspiring and heartbreaking true story of best friends torn apart and reunited against all odds. It's a mouthful.
Deborah Rosenberg is the executive editor of Smithsonian Magazine and a big part of our team here at the podcast. She's also my boss, so usually she's the one asking me questions.
It's by a woman named Hannah Pick Gosler. She actually died last fall, just before the book was published. But fortunately for all of us, she worked with a ghostwriter who was able to finish the book after she died. And I really like this book for a couple of reasons. First, Hannah was a very good childhood friend, best friends with Anne Frank. Wow. And we all feel like we know the story of Anne Frank and what happened, but we know it mainly from Anne's diary, one perspective on it. So I found it really illuminating to have this other perspective on something that felt kind of familiar, because while Anne was cooped up in an attic hiding from the Nazis with her family during the Holocaust, Hannah was not. She was out and about in Amsterdam. So it's a little different. It's an adult perspective on her childhood versus Anne's childhood contemporaneous account. It just fills in a lot of the gaps from Anne's story. So I found that really interesting.
And Hannah must not have known that Anne was in hiding at that time, right?
No. In fact, she had been told that Anne had gone off to Switzerland to stay with relatives. And so she thinks all along that Anne has escaped the fate of the other Jews in Amsterdam. But that turned out, of course, not to be the case. She does meet Anne again in Anne's very last days and discovers that she did not escape to Switzerland. But then Hannah goes on to live this wonderfully full life. She finally immigrates to Israel and becomes a nurse and has children and many grandchildren. And so in that sense, it is kind of an uplifting story of resilience. To people who are looking for something, I know it sounds like maybe it would be a depressing story, but it actually, for Hannah, is not depressing. She lived a remarkably long time and had this amazing life after she survived the Holocaust.
Before I worked at Smithsonian in the mid-aughts, I ran an Oscars blog with my friends.
Brian Wally is also part of the squad here at There's More to That. As the digital editorial director of Smithsonian Magazine, he's been my colleague for a while, but I only just learned that we share a passion for movies and movie awards.
I'm hoping that it has been buried to the sands of internet time and will never be resurfaced. But yeah, for a number of years, we would log the ceremonies. We would write our reviews of all the movies that were coming out and make predictions and everything.
I had no idea, Brian. We don't get to talk about this stuff enough day to day.
Look, my office door is open anytime.
Brian recommended a book that I'd also been interested in this year, Oscar Wars, A History of Hollywood in Gold, Sweat, and Tears by Michael Schulman.
The book is that the Oscars have always been fallible, but that's kind of why we love them.
Yeah. So give me an example of something you learned from this book.
Well, so I had only seen the infamous clip of the 1989 Oscar ceremony in which Rob Lowe sings Proud Mary with Snow White. for reasons that I didn't really understand until I read this book.
Used to work a lot for Walt Disney, starring in cartoons every night and day.
But you said goodbye to Grumpy and Sleepy, left the dwarf behind.
It's the opening ceremony, and there's an actress who's playing Snow White, and she has this high-pitched falsetto. And the story of how they cast her is just wild. They did like a blind casting call. There were 2 women left, and they put them like in a van. I was like, we're not going to tell you where to go. We're not going to tell you what this is for. And this woman had a hobby of like a Snow White impersonator. Wasn't even a Disney person. They never actually cleared this with Disney to use Snow White in the opening ceremony of the Oscars, which became a whole other thing when this became a famous flop. So it starts, and then she like coos her way onto the stage, goes, ooh, ooh, and then
meet your blind date, Rob Lowe.
There are people in giant star costumes frolicking on the stage, and they're introducing these people who were like in their 80s and 90s at the time, like the real first generation of Hollywood stars. And I don't even know how they get into singing Proud Mary, but for some reason they thought that was a good idea. And then I read this book, and even now it still is just one of these like, what were they thinking moments that you watch it. I had to put down the book, which was really hard to do at that point, and go on YouTube and watch it again and just be like, oh, this is really that bad. So learning about that was pretty interesting.
Rolling, keep the cameras rolling, keep the cameras rolling.
Rob Lowe is not known for his singing capability. And there's a story in there about how afterwards Lucille Ball sat next to him and comforted him and just sort of told him, well, it'll be okay. And to give you a sense of sort of the generations that were passing like ships in the night at that ceremony.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously this book is for you and for me, but who else? To whom else would you recommend this book, Brian?
I mean, I guess I would say for anyone who just loves Hollywood. The early chapters talk about the Academy's founding. Then it gets into the 1940s sister-sibling rivalry between Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine, a narrative that, had always been sort of referenced, but something I never quite understood. And then takes you through the 70s era and the X-rated movie that won the 1969 Oscars, A Midnight Cowboy. And so really anyone who cares about movie history and is a film buff, this is the book for them.
We got more book recommendations than there was time to include in this episode. Magazine editor Ted Scheinman brought us Malcolm Harris's book, Palo Alto, A History of California, Capitalism, and the World.
Harris is a very 21st century writer. He's funny, he's offhand, he's casual. He makes all this stuff very, very accessible. And it's a great Trojan horse, actually, if you want to have your parents read a little bit of radical history.
Online history editor Maylon Sully outed herself as a low-key goth in her recommendation. It's Haley Campbell's book, Deep Breath, All the Living and the Dead, From Embalmers to Executioners, an exploration of the people who have made death their life's work.
Yeah, I think this book would really appeal to people who have always been a little bit morbid, just someone who's kind of interested in death and kind of how it's just so taboo. She has a really great line in there where she's saying, if you're not a person like me, you will probably know someone who is, the one who makes you walk through old, ivy-covered cemeteries and tells you how this is the grave of a woman who stood too close to a fire and burned alive in her flammable dress. So I think that really summarizes, just someone who likes to wander around old cemeteries and, I guess thinks about death more than the average person.
Every year, editor Megan Gambino pulls together a list of the best kids' books, ranging from picture books to read to your toddler to graphic novels for the angsty teenager in your life.
One of my favorites is this book called Superpowered Animals by Soledad Romero Mourinho. It features 22 animals that the book calls masters of survival. So these are some of the fittest creatures on the planet, and it unpacks their superpowers. But I think what's cool about it is for this elementary school age, animals are big and superheroes are big, and this combines them both. I think these facts really stick with kids. Like, my older daughter recently told me that a newborn koala is the size of a jelly bean, and I had to fact check her on that, and she was right. Wow. I just like that they absorb these types of facts, and this book is full of them. Things where you can just open to a random page and dive in, or at bedtime you can take 1 or 2 pages and really focus on those. Something that you don't have to read cover to cover. I think it's fun for parents to read too.
So this is like a special Easter egg for listeners. At the end of the year, they're going to hear for the first time the voice of There's More to That producer, Jess Miller.
This is very weird. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Jess. No problem. So what book would you recommend to listeners of There's More to That, Jess?
Sure. The best work of nonfiction I read this year was called Enchantment, Awakening Wonder in an Anxious Age by Catherine May.
All right. Well, I would like to reawaken my sense of wonder. So what do you got for me?
This is a book for people who like beautiful writing and for people who are tired, which I think is most of us. This book is about getting into a practice of reminding yourself to find what is whimsical, what is fun, what is creative, what inspires you, just as you go about your day, but also how to sort of make time for it if that's something that's missing for you. It's a little more in the self-help genre than I normally go for, but I did enjoy it. I think the writing was quite good, and I don't know, it sort of hit at a nice time. I was sort of looking for some of those things.
So I share with you kind of that self-help reluctance. So how did this get past your defenses there?
Well, one thing you don't know about me yet, Chris, is that I moved to Maine in the last 3 years. That part you know. But since I live in Maine, I've been trying to embrace the cold. We have these beautiful beaches here that are freezing. And as a result, I'm trying to become a cold water swimmer and a surfer.
Wow.
So my cold water dipping friend / surfing friend was the person who recommended this book to me. Catherine May, the author of this book, is also a cold water swimmer. And just kind of getting shocked out of your senses is something that she is an advocate for. So when I picked up this book, I was sort of hoping for some encouragement. And it was helpful.
No, I lived in Southern California for a few years, and I tried to learn to surf, always with a wetsuit, and I never got very good. But what I appreciated about it was that I found I could not think about anything else when I was in the water, which was great as a kind of an anxious person. And Ms. May alludes to being an anxious age in the title of her book. So something physical like that can concentrate your attention, absolutely. That would certainly appeal to me as a reader. What's the wonder part of what she's presenting here?
It's sort of like sensory delight. There are a lot of beautiful descriptions in this book of making time to go look at a meteor shower or to go for a walk outside and collect stones and keep them in your pockets. And then, you put your coat away for the summer months and then you get it back on in the fall and you find these beautiful, smooth stones in your pocket. I'm a sucker for writing like that. And as someone who's sort of trying to build this practice of getting inspired, getting out of my house, enjoying the beautiful Maine wilderness, I think it was a nice read.
Wow. Okay. I would like to awaken wonder and dampen terror if I can do that. So if adding this to my reading list will accomplish that goal, then that's all it takes.
For sure. Well, to turn this back on you, I know that one thing you do quite frequently is to get to a movie. And I see that your book pick is movie related. What is it?
It is a movie related. So the title of the book that I'm recommending is Opposable Thumbs, How Siskel and Ebert Changed Movies Forever. It is by Matt Singer, who is a film critic. Like him, as I learned reading his book, we both were given a love of cinema by watching Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert review movies on TV every week over the course of about 25 years. And Matt's book about the history of their partnership is a history of how the show originated and evolved. You know, it started off on public TV and then went syndicated because it turns out that the public appetite for discussion of movies was much larger than anyone knew than the show started. But what I think makes this book transcend limited appeal is Matt argues that they normalize this whole culture of debate and elevated argument. Not always elevated, because a lot of people watched Siskel and Ebert for the way they would snipe at each other. And, you know, Matt argues that this ubiquitous sort of genre of the debate show, you know, things like Sports Center and you know, Crossfire, and whether the subject is politics or sports or current events, that all really came out of Siskel and Ebert kind of popularizing this idea of a debate being a worthy thing, and about having specific opinions about art not being some elitist kind of hoity-toity thing, but just that it was okay for anybody to get really invested in their emotional response to a movie that they saw and take some delight in interrogating their own opinion and subjecting it to the pressure of someone's opposing idea, and that being a worthy pursuit in itself. The title Opposable Thumbs, of course, refers to the fact that they became kind of synonymous with their thumbs up, thumbs down schema for lending their endorsement or not to a movie. And they were occasionally criticized for that, as though like they themselves were dumbing down criticism by just turning into a binary yes or no thing. But again, they were both writers. Roger Ebert was, I think, the first film critic ever to win a Pulitzer Prize. So it's not like they did not have nuanced opinions and didn't unpack their ideas in a more specific way than simply saying yes or no to this movie. But I really appreciated the book.
What would be the Chris Klimek version of the two thumbs, do you think? What's your scale?
Oh, man. See it in the theater or not? You know, was, when Siskel and Ebert started, it was the theater or, you know, television. And actually, that is another thing that Matt captures in the book, is kind of their responses to the changing technology of movie distribution over the decades that they were working. He specifically cites the first time they mention VCRs on their show with a lot of skepticism, and they both say, "Oh, well, I don't own one," you know. And then a few years later, they're like, "Yeah, okay, I broke down and got one." I don't know. I guess that's still my metric. I'm always pushing people not to wait for a great movie to appear on their sofa, you know, to make a night of it, make it something special. Put your shoes on and go, you know, turn your phone off and take it all in.
Well, Chris, I hope you have a happy holidays and a great new year, and we'll see you soon for some new episodes.
Thank you, Jess. What a joy it's been to work with you on a new show in 2023. This has been a real gift. Thank you for making it so rewarding.
Same. Thanks so much, Chris.
For more book recommendations, including some stunning photography collections as selected by the magazine's photo editors, check out our Best Books of 2023 package at smithsonianmag.com. We're going to take a little break over the next few weeks to ring in the new year and make you a new batch of episodes. We'll be back in February with more There's More to That. There's More to That is a production of Smithsonian Magazine and PRX Productions. From the magazine, our team is me, Deborah Rosenberg, and Brian Wally. From PRX, our team is Jessica Miller, Genevieve Sponsler, Adriana Rosas Rivera, Ry Dorsey, and Edwin Ochoa. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. Our episode artwork is by Emily Lankowitz, fact-checking by Stephanie Abramson. Our music is from APM Music. I'm still Chris Klimek. Thank you for listening.